What is the best case if you just ducked with the wrong person you've witnessed? Stepdad used to run the Iron Man equivalent in our area. Also had the absolute conviction found in his generation that justice was always on his side. Also he always slept naked, which I learned as a result of this incident. One late summer night, 2 idiot kids tried to steal his truck out of his driveway. He sees this happening from his bedroom window and goes tearing out of the house, totally nude, and chases these 2 terrified kids 4 blocks screaming, "I'm gonna get you." He tackles one and the cops were on scene in moments because obviously some concerned neighbor noticed this happening at 2 AM in our sleepy little town. God only knows what that 911 call sounded like. Probably a good thing the cop already knew the kid as a car thief. He hung out with a sobbing teen and suggested my stepdad sit in the cruiser today. I learned his wife could bring him some pants. Heading home after a night out, I see 3 guys surrounding a dude in an alley. Thinking something is going on, I stopped and watched for a little while when I hear one of the guys say something like, "Just shut the duck up and give us your shit." The second after that, all I see is a blur of arms and legs, and the second after there's the 3 dudes flat on their back. The lone dude getting robbed just walked out of there, right past me, and didn't even as much as look at me. When my wife was boned by a drunk driver, it happened to be right in front of a bar that a friend owned. The bouncer at the door witnessed the accident and saw the drunk jump from his car and run. Bouncer proceeds to chase him down, beat him, and drag him back to wait for the cops. When I thanked him, his response was, "Are you kidding?" That was a once in a lifetime chance to administer a well-deserved beating. A friend of mine's stepdad is not a good guy. He is full of rage and will lash out without a second thought. This made him the wrong target for 2 guys who tried to mug him near and at the moment. They came up to him and demanded he withdraw money. He grabbed one of them and smashed the guy's head and face into a brick wall. The other guy ran away, but he chased him down and beat the shit out of him. I watched a neighbor lay out 2 doucher bags that were harassing women at a party in about 15 seconds. He gave them every opportunity to apologize to the women and walk away, but they thought they could take him. Keeping it real went wrong. I don't know if this fits, but a kid at the park kicked a goose. It turned out it was a pretty ill-tempered animal. Chased the kid, knocked it down and bit him. The little boy ran to his mom crying. I swear that goose was strutting as it walked away. Didn't witness it, but it was all over the news some years ago. In Los Angeles, a guy tries to hijack a van. Canadian Olympic Judo team was in that van, including the trainer. To quote one of the members of that team, he did not know what hit him. I didn't witness it, but I got first-hand accounts and saw the police report. Bob was a delivery driver at Domino's and was a little off his rocker. Kind of older, upper 60s. Maybe all the way to 70, and the kind of guy who would cut out a 10-year-old to make a point, but also gave away our cancelled orders at the end of the night to homeless people. Anyways, Bob's delivering a pizza and gets mugged. The robber walked up and hit Bob in the head with a brick, dropped the brick, took his cash, and took the pizza. Bob got up, took the brick, and proceeded to mug him back, and then called the police. The gangbanger in his 20s was too terrified of the pizza man in his 70s to run away and waited to be arrested. In middle school, during lunch period, a kid in my grade was getting picked on by this larger kid and his friends. He said, "Stop it, leave me alone," a few times. No one watching did anything, because we were just dumb kids who didn't want to get picked on either. Large kid was poking him and calling him names while his buddies laughed. Suddenly he slapped him in the head. The other kid went bananas. Face red, tears streaming down his face. He jumped on large kid and beat his ass, crying, "Just leave me alone." Teachers broke it up and began scolding him, but everyone who had been watching vouched for him. Said he was only defending himself. I think they both got suspended anyway. No one messed with that kid anymore though. 10-year-old me seeing my dad's face when I didn't want to do the dishes and told my mom that she should do them because she did nothing around the house. I don't know how I survived, to be honest. I was a ninja with my Swedish friend. She was a semi-professional handball player at the time, so she was pretty muscular. Now, if you've ever been to India with or as a white woman, you're going to get groped. Often. Not to say all men in India are such pigs, but it's a populated country and enough of them are for to be an almost daily, or in some cases multiple times a day event. It was just after a heavy monsoon rain in Goa, and we were walking along a dirt path near the beach, right alongside this giant 20cm deep puddle that basically covered the whole road. She'd been accidentally groped twice already that day, and had done nothing. But this time was different. 5 or 6 youngish guys, late teens, maybe early 20s, all in designer jeans, sneakers and baseball hats, and so on. Despite us being at the beach, basically rich kids from Mumbai were walking along blocking the whole path and literally just grabbing girls as they passed by them. Then they got to her, and one of them just ran his hand up from her waist, across her breast, and she ducking socked him across the jaw so fast and hard he just crumpled backwards, before anyone knew what was happening, right into the huge mud puddle. In all his designer gear, he splashed around a bit, and we thought his friends were going to kick off, but, of course, they all put their heads down and kept walking, terrified as she started shouting at him. He tried to get up, reaching for his hat which was floating nearby, and she puts her foot on his chest and just pushes him back into the puddle, right down, making sure he was completely covered, face and everything. "Stay there today, I learned you can't see me anymore," she said, and we walked off. I checked back, and he was still lying in the puddle, even though she was 50 meters away or so, just waiting for her to leave. It was glorious. My family and I grew up in Baltimore City. The specific neighborhood we lived in wasn't the best, but certainly not the worst either at the time. Late 90s, early 2000s. One day when my little brother was around 7, he was outside in the street next to our yard playing on his skateboard. A group of kids not much older were walking by looking to start trouble. It all happened so fast. They ran up and starting beating on him, then stole his skateboard. My dad was home that day. My sister and I ran inside hysterical, and without even thinking twice he jumped up from his lazy boy in only his shirt and shorts. Maybe only touched one of our 7 stairs out front and absolutely bolted after those punk ass kids. This multiply 50-year-old man at the time chased them for like 3 blocks in his bare ass feet, and they are screaming, fearing for their lives. They finally dropped the skateboard at some point and my dad stopped chasing them and grabbed it. But holy duck, I'd never seen him so angry and move so fast. Signature angry dad warning sign. His eyes get huge and piercing, terrifyingly blue. When he came back his feet were so bloody and roughed up from straight sprinting on the concrete through gravel roads and alleyways. We never saw those kids near our house, let alone around our neighborhood again. My dad is the greatest. Don't duck with his kids. My youngest daughter was getting picked on in elementary school by a boy who was 2 grades above her. He constantly taunted, pushed, and annoyed her. One day he pushed her from behind, and she dropped her books. She immediately turned around and full on kicked him square in the nuts with all the force a soccer playing leg could muster. I've been told he curled up and bawled for several minutes while my daughter was sent to the principal's office. She was smiling when her mother picked her up from school. When I was 5, my dad took me to Walmart to get something for dinner and I saw a young couple fighting. This guy started really getting pissed off at this girl. He started getting in her face and threatening her, and he even yanked her hair a bit and was pushing her. I was really scared. My dad shouted something to the guy, and the guy told my dad to duck off. Next thing I know, I saw my dad run right up to the guy and grab him by his hair shouting, "Oh, you wanna hit your lady? You like hitting your lady? You wanna hit someone your size?" He beat the heck out of that guy. I don't remember much else, but cops were called, and they didn't do anything about what my dad did. Just took the other guy away. Had a regular at the bar, who was an amateur boxer. Some skinny drunk kid decided to pick a fight with him. Really egged him on. The regular kept saying, "Come on man, just let me drink my beer in peace," etc. After a good 10 minutes he stood up, took off his jacket, apologized to the bar staff, and well, it wasn't pretty. Once while my dad was on a trip, In the middle of winter our furnace broke. My mom went down to the basement and checked out the situation. She figured out what was broken and called a repair guy to tell him what she had found. The repair guy was on speakerphone. I held the phone while my mom held a flashlight and inspected the furnace. I'll never forget the look on her face when she finished her initial explanation and the guy replied with, "Why don't you put your husband on the phone, sweetie?" She snatched the phone from my hand and chewed me out before she cussed him out, so I never got to hear her exact words, but I imagine he got an earful. Some like 15-year-old somehow got my 16-year-old younger sister's phone number and kept calling her saying creepy stuff like, "I'm watching you." My dad is a federal investigator. Last I heard, that kid is no longer allowed to have or operate a telephone for a certain amount of time without parental supervision. Was at the bar on the back patio part with my girlfriends. There was this deaf woman sitting with her other deaf friend. They looked mid-20s about, and they were just sitting there quietly signing to each other. This drunk Kevin Federline type dude comes up and kept hitting on the woman. She clearly indicated non-verbally that she wasn't interested, but he still just hung around hovering over her, and by hover, he was literally hovering pressed up against her chair, touching her arms and back, while she did her best to ignore him and talk with her friend, while occasionally indicating to him to leave her alone. Then, all of a sudden she laid him out so fast. All I saw was him laying on his back looking dazed, while she stood over him and Helen Kelly yelling at him. I went to college in Hawaii. My roommate was a very big Samoan guy that played football at the university on the weekends. Him and his friends, all of whom were really nice, mellow guys, would pile into this old beat up pickup truck with a camper on the back, and they would drive down a couple streets in Waikiki. I was following them in traffic, moving slower than people walk, because that's just what kids did back then. There were a couple tourist guys college aged on mopeds in between my car and their truck. The moped guys were obviously drunk and pretending to zoom up to their truck, then brake hard, over and over again. Once, their moped hit the truck not hard enough that it did any damage, I don't think. Now you see this little door open on the camper, and 4 big Samoans climb out. Maybe this is my exaggerated memory, but I remember one guy just lifted up and flung to the ground like a doll, while the other guy got a punch to the gut. Those guys crawled to the sidewalk, and some strangers moved the mopeds to the side of the road, and they just turned up the next street and we all met back at the dorm. Was crazy. My mom told me this story after I was grown up. My mom worked at a hospital in the early 70s and this really big guy, well over 6 feet, used to harass her. My mom asked her to stop several times and he wouldn't. So she tells my dad about it. My dad is an old school Italian who is about 5 feet 2 tall and about 4 foot wide. He goes into the hospital and corners this guy. He gives him the look and spoke through clenched teeth and tells the moron, if he bothers his wife again he will put him in the hospital. My mom said the guy started crying. We kids remember the look. You did not mess around with him. R.I.P. Dad. I was living in a city about 15 years ago that was known for a lot of violent crime. This young guy, maybe 19 or 20, knocked on a fairly elderly in his 70s, as I recall, neighbor's house, and then tried to push his way in and rob him. There was a struggle, and the old man beat the absolute shit out of this young dude with an old rotary phone. It was on the news, and they showed footage from inside the old man's house. There was broken shit everywhere, and the young man ended up crashed through the old man's glass coffee table. They interviewed the old man, who was gentle as could be, nary a scratch on him, saying something along the lines of, "I know this kid. He's friends with my grandson. I didn't want to hurt him, but they've got to learn that they can't just go breaking into people's houses to rob them." The young man didn't die, but he ended up with some TBs that he wasn't expected to fully recover from. Not really a violent confrontation, but funny from a third person's perspective. I was in San Francisco and a white blonde girl went up to an Asian man who she presumed to be a tourist, and in a super demeaning and racist voice said, and gestured, "You take picture for me." And he responded in perfect English, "No a-hole here, I'm good. A shat." Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.